Thanks. This is very weird being up on a screen like this and being in a cinema. Okay, so hopefully all the right talk. If you're not, you can leave now, won't be offended, don't worry. I'm going to walk through my journey from being an Agile coach to now running my own product department at a small health company called accuRx in the UK. And throughout it, I'm going to do a bit of a talk around power and what I learned about my search for it. So first of all, just a hat tip. I stole or borrowed these slides from open source. This is the person who created the theme, so always want to give credit's due. And also, I'm from South London, so I've got quite a strong accent, and I have quite a habit of speaking quickly, so please do shout at me if I'm speaking too quickly. I noticed at the dinner the other day, people who weren't native speakers to English were looking at me very funny, so please do tell me to slow down. If you're ever from South London, let me know. We're in the area. So quickly, I'll do about me. And then I do 4 things that coaching taught me about leadership. And then I'm going to do 4 things that product management taught me about power. And then another 4 things about moving into product leadership, just in case any of you might be making the same journey. Maybe you can learn a few lessons, or maybe you can just ask me some questions at the end about it. And then once I actually got a chance to take over my product department, what I focused on immediately and what I still focus on now. And hopefully a bit of time for some Q&A at the end. If you do have questions, you can either ask them in the auditorium or you can tweet them at me and I'll have a look at the end and I'll answer them best of my abilities, either here or outside. So quickly, me. I'll start talking about things I'm not good at. If you haven't built one of these pages about the things you aren't very good at and share it with your colleagues and friends, I recommend it. It's very liberating. So I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD, I also rubbish in the mornings. My colleagues don't do morning meetings with me for that reason. So do try doing this if you haven't done it yet. In terms of my career, jumping through a little bit, I started as a mathematics teacher. I used to teach 11 to 18-year-olds maths out of university. I then worked in sales, and I ended up working for the UK government at a place called GDS, the Government Digital Service, which is where I really learnt my trade. What I didn't realize at the time was that these jobs actually helped me an awful lot become an Agile coach and then eventually become a product lead. Famous quote from Steve Jobs about the dots in your life are like in reverse. You can't plan your journey, but looking backwards, you can see how it makes sense. And I certainly learned an awful lot of skills that I now use today in those jobs. I then took the plunge and moved into product. See if my slides are going to operate. At Spotify, I moved across from Agile coaching and product management there. I wrote in a blog all about that. If you want to know more about it, this can be a very, very quick run through some of these topics. It's only 30 minutes. So if you want to learn more, have a read and comment on there. And now I am VP Product at accuRx. We're about 170 people. I've got about 10 product managers in my team and another sort of 10 doing other things as well. And again, I wrote another blog all about that if you want to know more about that journey. See if I can get these to move. So starting off, 4 things that coaching taught me about leadership. So let's go back a little bit to 2015, 2016. Sia was top of the charts. Drake, always near the top of the charts, it seems, in my life. I was working for the NHS in London, a place called Elephant and Castle, doing very agile coachy stuff, post-it notes and streamers and bunting and all kinds of things you might have seen in your worlds. I got the offer to go and move to New York with my wife, she's American, as an Agile coach. And I was super, super buzzed about this. It was something I'd always hoped to do in my life, but I didn't know I was going to. I'd always been a bit of a fanboy. You probably watched these videos in your life, and many, many talks about not copying things, but that's not one for today. I got my business card, which sounds stupid, but that was felt real to me. I remember getting it very vividly and being like, okay, this is a real thing. They can't take it away from me now. A lot of imposter syndrome there early on, definitely. I learned an awful lot in a very short amount of time. And the things I learned, I use today more than probably anything else I've learned in my life. And that comparison between being an Agile coach and VP product runs throughout this talk. So 4 things, I could do a talk for hours about this, and I will do in the bar happily about what I learned, but 4 things that really struck out looking back on it. One was around extreme positive intent. I'd love to say that I've always done this in my life, but I wouldn't say I had. I was sat down by a couple of my colleagues and very explicitly told I need to fix this or I won't be a good coach. And I was very, very lucky that I was able to do that. For those who haven't heard of it, I'm sure you all have, but it's assuming other people are coming into it with the right frame of mind. They're trying to do their best job and making sure you're not getting into a blame culture. Number 1, remember to assume positive intent. Easier said than done. Number 2 as a coach was around trusting by default. I grew up in South London. I would not say it was a trust by default culture. It was much more, I wouldn't go as far as saying Cliff Sahara with lions, but it was certainly like watching over your shoulder, someone trying to give you a mugging maybe. And so this was my default pattern. You had to earn my trust. You started off without not very much, and you had to build up. I had to flip that round, and this is a bit of a funny chart because it goes down all the way. Obviously, ideally, it doesn't go down all the way, but just flipping that over. I had to start from 100. From day one coming into the company, I had to assume that you were great. Especially in the job I now do, when we are hyperscaling, my company's gone from 30 people to 170 people in less than 2 years. People come in the door, and on day one, you have to give them all the responsibility. You have to do that, and you can only do that if you trust by default. Otherwise, micromanagement and everything else creeps in. Thirdly, as a coach, I learned all about communities. Now, I've been exposed to communities before, but I'd never been in such an amazing one. I never really had a chance to be taught new skills. I hadn't had a chance to get really amazing feedback from colleagues. And I hadn't had a chance to just be in a safe place to vent about how hard I was finding the job. This is from Wreck-It Ralph. If you haven't seen that movie, I recommend it. And I got those things. I met some of the best colleagues I've ever met. These people changed my life, and I'm so in debt to them. Arlie is still my coach today because she's really kind. And I got taught skills each week. Someone would say, hey, I've tried this new skill out with my teams. I'm going to teach it to all of you so you can go and try it out as well. I'd never had that kind of L&D. Just all I had to do each week was turn up. That was all. And I certainly had a group of people who would listen, ask questions, and empathize with what I was going through in this huge jump I'd made from being a coach in the NHS to working in New York and working for Spotify. And fourth, I had to learn to lead by influence. So this is from Myers-Briggs, and I'm not saying that Myers-Briggs changes the world, but it's an interesting point of reference for yourself to do repeatedly to see how you might answer the same questions differently. I was very much growing up sort of the commander. This was me, do that, do this, do that. That was kind of the leadership style I was taught as a young person. Now, I don't want to be Gordon Ramsay or Margaret Thatcher, and I was very lucky to be able to try and change this through my work being a coach. I learned about leadership by influence, which is an incredibly important skill in those high-tech companies. For anyone who's worked in them, and the talk earlier from Colin Bull around telling developers what to do, they won't do it. Spotify was the kind of place where if you told a developer what to do, they'd say why. And if you hadn't done a good answer, they'd just ignore you. They'd just turn their chair around. And so you had to learn to lead by influence. A lot of PMs came from Amazon and tried exactly that and just said, do this, do that, I'm the PM. And they just got ignored and left the company very quickly. So I changed my personality around. I had to do a lot of work on myself, did therapy and all those great things, and became more of an entertainer. Much more like I want to be referred to, more of an Elton John character in some capacities. I was now able to convince people about things. I was able to answer their questions around why. I was able to persuade them about why this thing we should do. Or if I was wrong, listen and change my mind, of course. So those are the 4 things I took, obviously many more, but 4 things for this talk I took from coaching forward, and I use every day in my now role as VP of Product. Next up, I moved across to product management. I'd love to say that I had this big plan again, I was going to do this. I didn't. I loved being a coach. Situations changed, there was a gap in a team. I ended up just taking it over for a short stint, and the rest is history, as they say. But I already knew I know how to build teams, both inside, outside of work. I could do a whole other talk around the comparisons between sports teams and cross-functional teams, very, very similar parodies. I'd also spent a lot of time coaching product managers. So I'd seen the job. I hadn't yet done it, but I'd seen it. And I was like, okay, let me have a go at this. I'd rather I have a go at it than coach another developer to be a product manager. But I really wanted to retain what I'd learned as an Agile coach around people. I liked people, people liked me. I didn't want to lose that. A lot of product managers I've met, that wasn't the case. And I was quite scared about losing myself in this new role. I've been given a team. I was really, really lucky. I started my first product management job running Discover Weekly. It was the product that I joined Spotify in the first place because I was so impressed with it. And that was where I started off with an amazing bunch of people. And again, I learned so much that I still use to date. It's not in this talk, but I really believe unless you've been a product manager, you can't manage product managers. And these are 4 things for today I'm going to talk about. How I learned to measure product management performance, why it's fucking hard to be a PM, what power is, and I can handle the pressure. So first of all, measuring product managers, notoriously hard. I did the job for, I think, 7 months before anyone even talked to me about it. And then, very luckily, this is some of the frameworks you might see, this is a bit of a piss take, but these are often how you try and measure. There's often a spreadsheet somewhere with 1,000 competencies on it about how product management, or even worse than that, it's some mythical thing that you're either born with or not. But all of that I didn't quite understand. I was just getting on with the job. I didn't really know exactly how to measure my own performance. And then someone came in. He actually came in from Amazon, amusingly. He wasn't necessarily very Amazon culturally, but he was a really cool guy. And he said, look, Benji, it's actually really, really simple. I care about 3 things for my product managers. I care about you can build high-performing teams. I care you can get into ship something quickly. And then I care about that thing you're shipping moves the metrics people care about. And we used to use this framework today where I work, and it's honestly changed my whole life and perception of product management, because it really is that simple in almost everywhere I've worked. And I was lucky. I was okay at it. I got some good feedback. I was enjoying the role, and I kept going. So second piece, if you've been a product manager, this maybe is obvious. If you haven't, I really recommend doing it for a couple of weeks when someone's on vacation to get a real feel for it, because you don't know until you know. One of the many reasons why it's so hard is you are accountable for everything. That weighs really heavily on one's shoulders. Your sleep patterns will change. Any junior PM from the organization, it's one of the first things they say to me. They're like, how do you cope with this new weight you have on my shoulders? And with great power comes great responsibility, as Peter Parker famously was told or said. One of the main reasons it's so hard is you haven't got positional authority. I know this is really obvious, but it cannot be overstated that no one in the team reports to you. And until you've actually done that and had to try and persuade people, it's nearly an impossible task at first. Luckily, I'd had the lead by influence training as a coach. Otherwise, I honestly would have been a terrible product manager. It's not a new concept. Famously, product managers are janitors. This is a really good blog if you haven't read it. And now as VP of Product, one of the things I do so often is just tell the team I understand how hard it is. It goes an awful long way to people who are finding their lives really, really challenging. Maybe having to work weekends, which is not something I'm saying we should do, to be clear. But they're finding it really hard to cope with that extra load. It's just to say to them, I understand how hard this job is. Thirdly, I really got into power. Now, growing up, I had a very Machiavellian view of power. The power's a bad thing. I didn't want power. People who seeked power were bad people. And I started doing exercises like this, moving motivators. If you haven't done it before, I really recommend doing it for yourself or with your team. It's from Management 3.0, available online. And in this, you must order the things you find important at work. And the hardest one to place for people is often power. Because what the description on this card says and what they mean by power aren't normally the same thing. And really, this changed my life. Power is there's enough room for me to influence what happens around me. Well, who doesn't want that? Especially if you're going to be a product manager, you certainly want that. And then a friend of mine actually gave me this book for Christmas and said, you need to read this. And this took my definition even further, a bit more scientific in its explanation, is to find one's capacity to alter another person's condition or state of mind. Now, of course, used for your own means, this is a very bad thing. But I come from an Agile Coach background where all I was trying to do was make everyone happier and also make the company move forward. So I felt confident I was using it in a decent way. And I was like, okay, I'm actually comfortable with this and I want more of it, which was a weird thing to say out loud to myself. And maybe in this room you're saying that's weird now. Fourth was around pressure. I mentioned it earlier. Pressure does really weird things to people. Pressure does make diamonds, but also it can cause you to act in strange ways. But I actually found that I liked the power, and I found that I thought I would misuse it less than some other people I'd seen in the organization I was working in and other places. And I also realized that I was comfortable with that pressure. That weight, definitely I could feel it, but I was okay with it. It wasn't affecting my life in a negative way outside of work so much. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. And I thought I was ready. So then I moved on. I left Spotify. I wanted to go and build my own product department. Now, whether I was ready or not, who knows, but I certainly thought I was. I had a couple of pit stops at a UK startup called Monzo, and then back actually in the US, a company called Hawkfish working against Trump in the election. And I landed at accuRx, so this small health tech company in the UK. The mission is simple. It's trying to make healthcare better through better communication between patients and doctors and everyone else involved in someone's care. It's now about 170 people. This was a photo from last year. It was about half that size. I'm just going to talk about the things I looked for when trying to make that move. It was a very deliberate move that I was trying to make. And it was one of the first times in my career I'd made such a deliberate move. And these are 4 things that I recommend if you're thinking of doing the same, trying to move from product management into product leadership and try and run your own department. So first things first, this is what they said to me when I said, hey, because I met them before. I've been friends with the CEO a little bit, and some of the people in the company I knew who worked there. I said, hey, I want to be head of product. I've finished my last job. I stay in the market for a little bit of time. I hate being bored. I'd love to be head of product at your company. He said, we don't need that. We're 30 people. It's too soon for that. But we do need someone to fix delivery. Would you be an Agile coach for us? And I said, not now. That's really kind of you, but I've kind of done that stage in my career. I moved into product. It was quite a tough transition. I want to stay in this world. I want to build my own department. But he said, okay, we can work this out. Are you prepared to help us fix this problem? I said, yeah, I'm prepared to help, but I also got to try and help what I want to try and achieve. So he said, okay, well, how about you're the product delivery lead? I said, okay, we're getting there. But how about some of these instead? Some of these other titles, maybe. Well, it was a bit sneaky because I knew there were no directors in the company. So I knew there was no chance of them giving me this title. So I looked on LinkedIn and no one had director in their title. So it's very unlikely they'd give it to me. This is the role I really wanted, because then it's actually really easy to go from product lead to product director to product head of product, or whatever that title is going to be in the company. I'd sneakily added an ampersand here to make it product and delivery lead, so I was happy with this, and this is the one I guessed in the end they would go with. And I also made it really clear, though, okay? So I said being sneaky, I was still clear, I want to be head of product. That is where I'm trying to get to. I don't mind helping you with your problem set right now of delivery, but this is where I need to be heading. They said, great, let's go with it. So I now had this hybrid role between the two, and it was about proving if I had the stuff. And I was okay with that. Throughout my life, and I'm sure everyone else in this room's lives, it's okay to go and prove you've got what you say you've got, and then be given more responsibility and more power. Number 2, so I knew this was going to be a hopping situation. I was going to try and come in, prove my skills, and get this head of product role that I wanted so I could run my own product department the way that I'd hoped would be successful. Well, in doing that, I knew I needed to get the product manager reporting into me. I'd seen in previous organizations that matters so much, especially if you're trying to do organizational change. Yes, of course, you can use influence, but if you have positional authority plus influence, it's an awful lot easier to make quick changes. And I've already changed who I was, so now I wanted to have both of those things. The other thing is, I wanted to prove that I could manage product managers. That's a very specific skill. And all the time, and I do it now probably as well, but like, oh, have you managed product managers before? I'd done it a little bit beforehand, but hadn't had a chance to show it at this organization. And until you can show it to people, you're really good at it, no one will believe you can do it necessarily. And so in negotiations, I made it quite clear I wanted people reporting into me. It somehow got a little bit caught into coaching, sort of a sneaky move there from the CEO. But I was like, hang on, I thought we talked about managing. He said, okay, well, there's actually someone else internally, it turns out, who's already managed them, who also kind of wants the head of product role. But how about you take some and he takes some, we'll work it out later on. Sounds a bit messy, but still, I now have some product managers reporting into me. I'm able to show my skills. Third thing was a values check. Now, this is something I'm sure you're all really good at anyway. It took me years to work out to do this. One, check they align with your own values. Because personally, I will always choose my own values over the organization's values. I learned that the hard way. Luckily, these align really well with my own values. So that was a match. But secondly, I'd also learned the values on the wall aren't the values always being lived in organizations. Luckily, I knew someone in the company, and so I messaged them and just said, hey, do you think I'd fit in there well? Which basically says, are they living their values? Are you going to be annoyed by this? He said, no, you'd love it here. They're your kind of people, your kind of place. Okay, great. And fourth, make sure you can succeed. You're making this big step. You're going to a smaller company potentially, certainly I was. You make a big step. You want to make sure you're able to win. Or if you can't win, then it might be a failure. It'll take a long time to come back from that. Well, luckily, it was about shipping and shipping faster. They'd moved from 1 team to 4 teams very quickly, and they didn't know how to organize the work. I was like, okay, that is something I know an awful lot about from my time as an Agile coach. I feel pretty confident I can at least help in this area. And it worked. I was really lucky. Obviously, in any situation, an awful amount of luck came into play. But I was able to move from this product and delivery lead role to the head of product role, and then eventually the VP of product role, which was more of just a company scaling thing than anything else. And I also used the opportunity, again, this sounds very overconfident, but I used the opportunity to say, hey, I think I'm doing a good job. I think I should probably be on the exec team as well. And I poked, and they said, yeah, okay, go on then. We agree. We think you are doing this work, and the head of product really should be on the exec team. And so I joined our executive team, which was also very important for actually trying to scale the company and the work I was doing. And this was something I'd always wanted to do. From the moment I got annoyed and frustrated a little bit in previous parts of my career, I realized that until you're on the exec team and you're in the room, it's actually very hard to change a whole company's culture and how they're working. Not to say it needs to be changed, but I want to be in the room to almost defend it or have an opinion on what's going to happen. And so those are the 4 things I recommend minimum, if you're going to move into a product leadership role, potential organization, that you really think about. Okay, so I was here, I had the job, and now I had to prove I could do the job and hyperscale the organization. It was very clear from the start they were going to go through very, very fast scaling. They got an £8 million injection of cash via a Series A. I was like, okay, well, I've done this before a couple of times. I feel confident I can do this. This is my very scary scaling GIF. One point that's really important going into this, and if you are doing this yourself or think of doing yourself, is more than likely there'll be quite a few things that are missing or broken if there hasn't been someone in your role before. There'd never been a head of product. I was the first person in that role. There's so many things you could fix. So focus on getting them to 7 out of 10 and moving on to the next problem. If in your whole time trying to get to 9 or 10 out of 10, you'll never get on to the next thing, and the fires around you will just burn. So get it till it's okay and then move on. And that's exactly what I did with these 4 things. And to this day, these are things I still spend a lot of time doing. So first, fix hiring. There was no process written down for hiring. I asked how we'd hired our current product managers. The CEO said, oh, I just did it. I was like, okay, well, I'd love to now own this. So first things first, write it down. People can then discuss it. People can then comment on it, disagree on it. And then pick a few simple rules you want to go after. For us, I'd stolen this from being an Agile Coach at Spotify. We pair on everything. So we pair for CV screening, we pair the first round of chats, everything is paired. 1, it reduces bias, and 2, if you're having a bad day just in general, your colleague can cover for you. Occasionally, you both have a bad day, and that's another story. And then this is a bit of a jump forward to something we changed in the last kind of year, actually. I also now make product managers walk the walk. Product managers and Agile coaches are great at talking about their work. They're not so great always at actually doing it, I found. And that's very hard to interview for. And I stole this from Joy Inc. and also from some work at Spotify, where they made you run a retrospective as an Agile coach in the interview process. So now our product managers, they want a job with us, have to run a real team's planning session. They have to turn up and run it. Yes, we give them some prep in advance, but let's see if they can do it. 2, there was no progression framework. I inherited a few different product managers of various different skill sets, and they were saying, oh, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. There was nothing written down to say how we're going to measure anyone's performance. So again, 7 out of 10, get in a room, write a first draft, share it with people already there, and get something out the door so you can immediately start measuring. Behind this is still the same things, okay, the same 3 things. Build a high-performing team, ship stuff quickly, and move metrics. That, of course, isn't just enough for a progression framework, so these different capabilities you might need on top of that. Product was the first part of organization to build one of these, and then everyone else then built one after it. Now the whole company has one each. Thirdly, decide your rough product process. Don't overcomplicate it. For me, it was vision, OKRs, and roadmap. I'm not saying this is what you should do, to be clear, but what this company needed was that. There was a real lack for each product about where it was trying to go, and so there was no trust between the various layers. There was no target setting. There was no short-term what we're trying to do, so there was Gantt charts everywhere, so move from that to OKRs. And there wasn't visible roadmaps. So constantly product managers were getting hammered on DMs saying, what are you working on? What's happening? Because there's no way for people to self-serve the information. And then finally, everyone's probably seen this before, right? Trying to balance autonomy and alignment is incredibly hard. Everyone tries to get that top right-hand side. Now, we are a hyper-scaling company, and that was made very clear. So I knew we needed more autonomy than people currently had. I also got that in feedback straight away. Well, how do you get people more autonomy? Well, you have to get them more alignment. Because under a year earlier, this was the size of the whole company. It was one product team. But that product team had then become the leadership team. And they were not finding it easy to hand over their baby, okay? It's very common. So we had to find a way to build trust vertically through organization so decisions could be made by the people closest to the work, and then we could actually scale at pace. Otherwise, it was all going to break down really quickly. When companies say, oh, we got to 30, got to 50, got to 100, and everything broke, it mostly breaks because of a lack of trust between people making decisions. That's the main reason. So we had to get ahead of this. I didn't reinvent the wheel. I just brought in check-ins, simple vertical alignment check-ins on a regular cadence. What are you working on now? What are you working on next? What help do you need? Get in a room with those stakeholders, with that original team, so they can ask questions, so they can feel more confident in what you're doing and give you more of that autonomy you're probably desiring. After each check-in, it's posted on a Slack channel where they're all held, with the deck, how they're doing against OKRs, and you can ask any questions asynchronously afterwards as well. And then all you do is argue about how often they're going to happen. Early on, every week, then every 2 weeks, now every 3 weeks. As trust grows, hopefully you can extend how often you do these. So it's regular enough that you have the information you need, but not so regular it's a burden, because it is a burden on the product manager making decks for these things. There's no two ways about that. And that's it today. That's all I'm going to talk about. I could do this for hours, but hopefully there's a few things in here that were helpful. I've walked through these different 12 steps. If you are an Agile coach now and maybe want a VP of product in the future, or just want to pick one or two of these out that maybe are helpful for yourself, these are the things that really stuck with me. And then if you are in the role of VP of product or head of product or running your own department, and this is probably true if you're running other departments as well, but these are the 4 things that I focused on and continue to focus on in this role. And if you do happen to want to move to London and come and work at accuRx, we do have jobs available. We are scaling at quite a clip, especially engineering roles, but across the board, we've got a load. We are office first, so you have to move to London. But if you're interested, come and talk to me. I can say about what we do in more detail. And over to questions.
Yes. First applause, then questions. Okay, does anyone have a question? Oh, yes, from the beginning of the room. Thank you very much.
Could you share a couple more words about what this progression framework is about? It's just how it's different with the roadmap, or maybe I'm confusing the definitions.
Yeah, absolutely. So the progression framework is for each individual product manager about how they measure their performance. So if you're a new product manager coming into an organization, it's very easy to say, okay, well, I know you care about building healthy teams. I know you care about shipping pace and moving metrics, but how do I get better at those things? And so that's broken down into those blocks you saw on that Trello board to say, okay, these are the skills I need to have to be able to do the job really well. So with their manager, they can sit down and they can self-assess. I think I'm great at this, not so good at this. And their manager can do the same, and they can then look to how to improve certain skills over some period of time. Yeah, personal development plans can be built off the back of these frameworks. No worries.
Thank you. Last one, if there is. Oh, thank you.
So you mentioned trust by default, that it's very important. And I'm curious, how do you evoke that in people that actually have different experiences, that when the trust failed, is it possible to rebuild it, and how to approach it in the team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really hard. I think the fact that I myself have been on that journey makes it slightly easier, that I didn't come from that background. I certainly wasn't always like that way inclined. I think there's 2 different ways you can come at it. One's kind of more business, and one's probably more fluffy and personal. The business one is you really haven't got a choice. If you're in a hyperscaling company, you're adding in 10 new people every 2 weeks. If you don't trust them by default, things break immediately, because those people aren't given all the information they need to do the job really quickly. And so they're constantly asking questions, trying to find the information out from people, trying to be useful. And there aren't enough people with that information to actually give it to them. And so all the people who are hired can't add any impact, and everything just grinds to a halt. The second one is really more of a personal thing, is like there's probably a reason that they don't trust by default. They've probably had a bad experience or maybe multiple bad experiences. I've had bad experiences having moved to this system because of it, that have very much shaken me to the core about whether it is the right way to approach life. And so it's basically about either doing some amateur therapy, some amateur coaching, or if you're professional, either of those, great, and maybe helping them to seek that kind of advice from people and really work out why they don't trust people, what's happened to them. Most people are carrying a bunch of PTSD from previous jobs. I certainly am, and everyone else is, and it's about trying to work out if that's affecting you in negative ways and why you can't trust those around you.